Now, regarding the trade war, so Trump did send a kind of an envoy, the Senator Steve Daines, who is a Montana senator, a longtime Trump supporter. He also lived in China, my understanding, quite a few years. So he knows China quite a bit. And he recently was in Beijing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't get the feeling he achieved much other than just to go to visit and familiarize the people there and kind of like get started. Is that how you feel about his trip as well?
Mm. Well, absolutely. I mean, there's been no proper thought through communication between the U.S. government and the Chinese government. I mean, for one thing, this particular U.S. government cannot make up its mind about China. Do they see it as a malevolent enemy? This intelligence report that I mentioned has a whole section entitled China's malign activities. Is it an enemy or is it a potential partner? I mean, they can't make up their mind. And until they do, how can they develop a policy? And, this senator is no doubt a charming and clever
Mhm,
man,
mhm.
but is he really the person who understands all of these issues that we've talked about at such length in this program? I doubt it.
Hmm. Yeah. And it seems like China's responded to, they were nice to him. He get to meet
No.
the vice prime minister, high level officials, and they were all nice. But right after he left, Li Qiang, the prime minister, did sign a anti-foreign sanctions act,
Yeah.
which is China's response is saying, if you, an individual or a company, to to follow the order, sanction us, our company, and our interest, we are going to punish you. And
Yeah.
so that seems like a pretty strong signal to the United States, because the United States is the one who's sanctioning everybody, including China. So that seems like China now is pretty much almost like giving up. Really, United States would come to a senses to do something sensible. China would just move on with whatever they think appropriate to protect Chinese interest. That seems to be the message.
What China is doing is it's defending its economic sovereignty,
Hmm.
and which anybody who has any knowledge at all of Chinese history and of the temperament of the country would know it was bound to do. I
Hmm.
mean, this idea that you can somehow bend China to your will by threatening it with sanctions is ridiculous. It is utterly wrong. It's inevitably going to provoke a response. And the fact that the Chinese have just made this decision directly after this visit by this representative suggests they weren't impressed by anything he had to say. They didn't feel that he was suggesting anything new or was really giving the Chinese any reason to believe that the United States was rethinking its approach and was seeking cooperation.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Turkey.
Mm,
A lot of things is happening there in Turkey. Erdogan seems in a very peculiar situation because
mm,
domestically there are lots of demonstrations that people are not happy how he treated his political opponent, right?
yeah,
And also in the meantime, in Syria, HTS, which Turkey backed, are being attacked by both Israel and also the former government's militaries. And I
yeah.
just read this morning, even Hezbollah has been helping out to attack HTS interest, etc. So that cannot be a good situation for Turkey. Can you explain what is going on and what is Erdogan, what is situation now? Very
Yes,
peculiar.
I mean, the thing to understand about Erdogan is that his position on the one hand looks quite strong,
Hmm.
and on the other hand, it's also fairly weak. Firstly, he had a very successful telephone conversation with Trump. Apparently, he and Trump get on well, so
Hmm.
that gives him some degree of reassurance. He has a long-standing relationship with the Russians. It's not an easy one, and he's very resentful of the Russians in all kinds of ways. But nonetheless, he's got that relationship. So that makes him, on the one hand, feel strong. Against that, the economy in Turkey is in a very fragile state. There's been years of high inflation, very high inflation. The currency is very unstable. The financial system is very unstable. And the great victory in Syria is turning into a disaster because, exactly as we discussed on these programs, what Erdogan is discovering is that instead of Syria, quietly slotting in and accepting its position as a sort of subordinate vassal state to Turkey, it's in fact becoming a conflict zone with Turkey one of the parties, and Turkey unable to control the situation in Syria in the way that I think he expected, and with a real risk that the growing instability in Syria is going to expand to Turkey as well. So he does what he always does in this situation. He tries to secure his position domestically by striking at his enemies. So the mayor of Istanbul, Imamoglu, is a popular politician. Istanbul is Turkey's biggest city. It was the political base that Erdogan once had, and from which he launched his bid to become Turkey's leader. So he's acted to try to suppress that potential challenge, even as he feels that on the one hand, he can get away with it because he's got all this international support, but on the other, that the position beneath him is becoming less stable and more fragile. So he's taken this extraordinary step. It shows, by the way, how little regard he has for politics and democracy and the rule of law and all of those things. But anyway, let's not worry too much about that. I don't think any of us watching this program or participating in this program had any doubts about that. But anyway, that's what Erdogan is thinking, that he has to stabilize at least his own position whilst he still can. Of course, that's provoked protests. He probably calculates that he can see them through. We'll see if he's right.
One thing I noticed since we were talking about the Panama Canal, right? That deal is still going on. Lots of discussion in China. In the meantime, there are a few things happening. So, like for example, Mexico has been working on a thing called the Oceanic Corridor,
Yeah.
which is connecting the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific coast, right? And so Mexico is working on that. That can be alternative to the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
Thailand is exploring and also proposed a canal. They have been on and off of this discussion, either a canal or a land bridge, which is across the Kra Isthmus, which could potentially bypass the Strait of Malacca. And of course, Cambodia is now undertaking a large infrastructure project. They are building a Funan Techno Canal, which can help China opens up one more, go to the ocean. And in the midst of all this, China and Russia has been increasing their cooperation to working on a northern sea route, which make it the shorter sea passage connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific through the Arctic. Now, with all that, can we say there is an alternative navigation system taking shape? Can we say that?
Undoubtedly. And is that surprising? Which is the country that has the most interest in securing secure navigation? It is the country that is the biggest trader in finished goods. China is far and away the biggest trader in finished goods. It trades with every part of the world now. So it needs to create a system of secure navigation, because the system that was created by the United States is being weaponized against it. The United States is trying to exclude China from the former sea routes that existed before, and countries that want to trade with China, countries that need to trade with China, Mexico, Thailand, Russia, they have an interest, a joint interest with China in facilitating the creation of this alternative trading system. There's no doubt about this.
Yeah, and in the past, like Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, when it was built, it was a gigantic project that requires a huge amount of funding and the technology know-how, and only the West had that. I think that
Yes.
today the game changing is that China has it. China has the funding and the technology know-how, so China can do it because in the past it was more exclusive, right? The West could do it. Only the West could do it, right? It's different today.
But it's completely different today because China can do it. It's not just that the West doesn't have the monopoly on doing it as it once did. It's debatable whether the West can any longer do it. I mean, of course, the Americans built the Panama Canal, and they did it brilliantly, by the way, in more than 100 years ago. But the America that built the Panama Canal had depths of engineering skill and resources and knowledge about how to build a Panama Canal, something like that, which you just don't see today. Bear in mind, just a few months ago, there was this pier that was created in Gaza, and the sea swept it away. So, a country that can't build a single pier, are they going to build a rival to the Panama Canal or do something similar to the Panama Canal? Well, I don't think so.
Hmm. And it's not just China that have the ability to do it. I think a country is also looking at those canals and the strait. They're all very profitable, right? People, it
Yeah.
is lucrative for the country to have those very important trade route, right? So they want to be part of that too. They are like, okay, why can't we build a land bridge or a canal or what have you, so that we can also make some money and get into this whole, thing. So there's incentives as well, right?
There are huge incentives. As I said, more and more countries around the world want to be part of a trading system that will
Mm-hmm.
profit them. I mean, they're not doing this because they are suddenly have charitable feelings towards China. Many of them are very, very friendly feelings
Mm-hmm.
towards China, but they're doing this because it is in their long term material self interest. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One more thing is there is some update about the chip wars, right? The chips wars, I can barely follow because every day there is some report in the Chinese media about some breakthroughs. So the
Yeah.
latest one is Jack Ma. He backed Ant. He has been touting that there is some AI breakthrough using the Chinese chips, okay? And also ASML apparently are planning to build reuse and repair plant in China, which I'm sure the US doesn't like that. But at this point, I really don't think there is a whole lot the US can do to really stop China in the chips area, right?
The US stopped China in the chips area. I mean, I mean, again, I absolutely. I mean, this is how some people in America thought. It's how the Biden people thought.
Mhm,
But I mean, the whole thing again, always for me, had a fantastic quality about it. The country that makes more chips than every other country, by far,
mhm,
cannot make advanced chips. I mean, this is just stupid. I mean, you just anybody who understands industrial economics knows that the single biggest advantage is scale.
mhm. Yeah,
it,
yeah.
is, it is
Mhm,
scale. I mean, the fact that China makes so many chips, that it has so much industry, that it has such advanced logistical chains, the fact that its universities produce so many STEM
mhm,
graduates, more, I believe, than the whole of the collective West combined, by the way. I had a comparison. Somebody told me, that in Britain, basically, we're stripping our universities of humanities degrees so
mhm,
that everybody can study STEM. And nonetheless, we produce 20,000 STEM graduates. China's produces in any year over 250,000. I mean,
mhm,
that's
mhm,
the scale of difference. And the other thing is these are highly educated, highly motivated, well trained people. You're going to get at least as good an education in STEM
yeah.
in a Chinese university as you will in any Western one. Once upon a time, where when Chinese students had to come to Cambridge to learn mathematics, that's all far in the past.
Hmm.
Anyway, to think that this country that has all these resources of intellect and human resources and industrial and logistical and technological resources cannot produce advanced chips. It's just stupid. I mean,
Yeah.
it just shows a fundamental failure to understand basic economic and, by the way, human realities.
Mhm. Well, that's probably part of the reason that the US cannot make up its mind how to deal
Yeah,
with China,
yeah,
because deep down they know in all areas to defeat China is basically impossible. They know that, but they don't want to just like why don't you just join China, right? But they don't seem to want to do that either, at least not for now. So
no,
we're going to see this back and forth, like
yes.
right, isn't it? That's part of it, the problem that US have now, you know.
It is the problem that the US has. It's the problem that the West has because,
Mhm.
as I said, China doing all of these things is, as I said previously in the program, for the Westerners and especially for Americans, but to some extent for all Westerners, it is violates their understanding of what the natural order is. They're on top.
Mhm.
Everyone else is below them. Maybe China isn't at the very bottom. We can, other people, darker skinned people are,
Mhm.
but nonetheless, they can't possibly be at the same level as us. That's
Mhm.
impossible. We can't accept that. And well, one day we will have to accept it. I mean, because it's going to happen. And the utterly frustrating thing is that it's not a problem. I mean, human civilization moves forward.
Mhm.
That's the big thing. The
Yeah.
fact that China is moving it forward. That is the thing. That is the great thing. It's the fact that China is achieving all of these great things, that it's breaking through in technologies, that it's making electric cars work properly, that it's going to produce the best jet engines and all of that. That's good for all humanity. If we could just see that, we would not see the threat there. We would see the opportunity and we would see the benefit. And we would see also that it's not just a good opportunity and beneficial to us. We would see that it's objectively good.
It's the hubris. I mean, it is the
Yeah.
hubris that somehow the United States and the West don't see
Mm.
human, we are equal. We
Yes.
fundamentally, I don't think they realize that. They accept
No.
the fact that we're all equal. I mean,
Yes.
if we accept that we're equal, I mean, in the United States, right, everybody should be equal. If you see that, okay, having the Chinese EV, I don't see the problem. So me
No.
as a consumer, I will have a better car, and the US car manufacturers will have to catch up
Yeah.
and doing innovation. They will
Yeah.
force to do better. I don't see
Yeah.
the problem. But
No.
it's just this idea that all the Chinese EV will dominant, will be running on the street. I think it's for some people, it's just hard to imagine. They can't accept that.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, to think that Chrysler and General Motors and BMW and Mercedes and Fiat are not the dominant car manufacturers anymore. That one prefers a car from BYD to
Yeah.
BMW. I mean, that again is something, as I said, that Westerners just cannot get their heads
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Yeah. Fundamentally, that's the problem. Yeah. I do notice that. Yeah.